Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Welcome to our journey into the timeless wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. In this sacred conversation, Sri Krishna guides Arjuna through confusion, fear, duty, and the deeper meaning of life. Through Krishna's teachings, we will explore who we truly are, why we experience suffering, what happens beyond this temporary body, and how we can develop real peace and spiritual understanding. As we study each teaching, our goal is not simply to gain knowledge, but to understand it, apply it in our daily lives, and gradually transform our consciousness. Let us begin this beautiful journey with Krishna.
Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into something I like to call the battlefield paradox when the master serves. We are literally stepping right onto the epic battlefield of Kurukshetra. This is the very opening scene of the Bhagavad Gita. And there's this massive, glaring contradiction right up front that just completely flips everything we think we know about power and devotion right on its head. Okay, let's dive into this because the core visual we're looking at today is, well, it's pretty mind-bending. Just think about it for a second. What actually happens when the supreme master of the entire universe takes direct orders from a mortal? I mean, it's kind of like a five-star general acting as a foot soldier's chauffeur, right? We always picture the divine sitting way up high, issuing these grand, sweeping commands. But this specific text, it gives us the exact opposite scenario. To really get a feel for this, listen to the warrior prince Arjuna right in the thick of the chaos. He issues this command. "O infallible one, please draw my chariot between the two armies, so that I may see those present here who desire to fight, and with whom I must contend in this great trial of arms." Just picture the scene, okay? You've got conch shells blowing, weapons are raised, the noise is absolutely deafening, and Arjuna tells his charioteer to drive right out into that perilous no man's land. But honestly, the real shocker here isn't where they're going, it's who is doing the driving, because his charioteer is Krishna. And this brilliantly illustrates the paradox we're talking about. On one hand, you have Krishna's ultimate identity, the supreme personality of Godhead, literally the absolute top of the cosmic hierarchy. But right now, in this exact moment, his functional role is a charioteer, just carrying out orders, a driver, a servant. Now, in the ancient world, driving a chariot was a highly subservient and frankly extremely dangerous position. So you really have to wonder, how on earth do we reconcile the supreme being acting as a battlefield chauffeur? Well, the source material explains this incredibly jarring contradiction with a beautiful two-word phrase, causeless mercy. See, even though Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, he takes on this servant role out of pure, unadulterated affection. It's called causeless because it's not driven by some grand cosmic obligation, and it certainly isn't from a lack of power. No one is forcing him to do this. He actually chooses to step into this subservient position simply because he loves his friend. Now, what's really interesting about this is the specific name Arjuna uses to address Krishna. He calls him Asuchyut, which translates to the infallible one. And usually when we hear the word infallible, we immediately think of, endless raw power or someone who makes zero mistakes. But here, the infallibility is entirely relational. Krishna is infallible because he never ever fails in his affection for his devotees. He doesn't hesitate for even a split second to carry out Arjuna's orders, because that immense love makes him flawlessly devoted. But we also need to be careful here to make sure we don't accidentally mistake this beautiful subservience for weakness. The commentary introduces another really important title, Rishikesha. This means the Lord of the total senses. And this is an absolutely crucial clarification. The text wants us to understand that by playing the driver, Krishna isn't being degraded in any way. Even as a servant, his supreme position is completely unchallenged. He might be playing the subordinate role, but his absolute authority remains 100% intact. Which brings us to the core theology of this whole interaction. It's described as a sweet and transcendental relationship. Because think about it, usually a master just sits back and barks orders at everyone, right? But here, we see this beautifully reciprocal two-way street. The devotee, Arjuna, is obviously always ready to render service. Yet surprisingly, the Lord is also actively seeking out opportunities to serve the devotee. In fact, the text actually notes that Krishna takes greater transcendental pleasure in being ordered around by his pure devotee than he does in giving the orders himself. Pure devotion just completely overrides the traditional hierarchy. Okay, so let's pivot for a second and look back at the human element here. Why exactly is Arjuna giving this specific order? Why ask to be driven into a literal war zone? Well, the text highlights a vital piece of his psychology. As a pure devotee, Arjuna fundamentally had zero desire to fight. He's looking across this massive field at his own cousins, uncles, and former teachers. This isn't some faceless, anonymous enemy. It's literally his family. His absolute natural inclination is peace. So why is he standing there in full armor? Our text places the blame squarely on the leader of the opposing side, the obstinacy of Duryodhana. Arjuna is standing on the brink of complete catastrophe, not out of some blind ambition or thirst for violence, but because he was quite literally forced onto the battlefield. Duryodhana stubbornly, completely opposed peace. Every single diplomatic avenue had been exhausted. This war was entirely forced upon Arjuna. So the crucial point is this. It reveals the true, heavy motive behind Arjuna's command. When he says, "Draw my chariot forward," he isn't trying to pump himself up with battle lust or figure out some ruthless attack strategy. He was highly anxious. He basically wanted to look directly at the leaders who were stubbornly demanding this unwanted war. It's this incredibly heavy moment of reflection where he's just confronting the sheer tragedy of people actively choosing destruction. And honestly, there is a deep, overwhelming sense of finality in this moment. The commentary explicitly points out that at this stage, there was absolutely no question of a peacemaking endeavor. That ship had sailed. The lines were permanently drawn in the sand. So Arjuna's request to just see his enemies one last time carries this immense, tragic weight. He's basically surveying a pending doom, fully aware that the time for talking has officially passed. Which leaves us contemplating the sheer magnitude of this scene. The ultimate divine authority, acting out of causeless love as a humble driver, guiding a reluctant warrior right into a devastating, unavoidable war. It takes Arjuna's ancient, very specific dilemma and transforms it into something deeply universal for us. It really makes us ask, when we are forced into the unwanted battles of our own lives, how do we face them? And much like Arjuna, leaning on his infallible charioteer, where exactly do we place our devotion when the time for peace has finally passed? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'm going to leave you to ponder that one.